Let me expand my side and we'll. All right. So the topic, and again, it's a topic that some individuals struggle with, some may not, or you may have experienced some of these components in some format. So when we really think about it and look at the true problem, food may not be the problem. It's really some of the triggers, habits, emotional responses that we have picked up along the way, whether it's what we've been exposed to, from a childhood. Because the interesting part is, we pick up these different programming components from environments we're exposed to, communication patterns that we're exposed to, parenting we're exposed to. So there's a lot of different formats, and many times when we're from, I think, like 4 to 12 age range, we get exposed to these different patterns and formats, and we cannot negate them. So we take them on in some format. We don't have a skill set to kind of move them on. So many times we take on some of these patterns or things that we've been exposed to. So we're going to dive into more triggers, habits, emotional responses. Really, food's not the enemy. It's really a messenger, but obviously with the manufacturing of food today, they've made it very, very addicting, unfortunately. And that's kind of a sad component. Obviously, we want it to taste good, but it doesn't have to be a addictive component. But there's a lot of foods now that some of it really doesn't fall into food category that is very, very addicting, I should say. A lot of people try to fix nutrition without addressing real drivers, the emotional response and the environmental impact or environment you set up. Those are two components that we probably don't talk about enough, specifically around nutrition. Because ideally what we want to try to do with you guys is work on fixing the root components and the symptoms are things that may pop up so that you have more control. And then with more control, you can make better decisions, specifically in your desired outcome. And then also with the emotional components in general, controlling your state. You hear us talk about that a lot. And these are just some of the reasons why we may reach for food or use food as a mechanism. It, it may not be a hunger thing because many times it becomes a habit thing or a boredom thing or a stress response or emotion response in some format. So really identifying, the reasoning and the association you may have with food. I mean, I think that's very important. And sometimes we don't take the time um, to really look at that component. So it could be a stress response, it could be boredom, it could be even fatigue, because many times if we are in a fatigue state and or chasing energy, we will use food to fill that gap, and it may push us over a calorie marker, or it may be a food that's not lining up with your macro goals and or fall in line with your health desires. So what it does is food becomes a coping mechanism, not necessarily a fuel. And when it's really designed for a fuel, it's kind of flipped on us. Just like I was discussing a little bit earlier, it's how addictive some of the properties they put in food nowadays, and that becomes the more the issue. So when we look at that, if it becomes a coping mechanism, what's the trigger? What's the emotion? We kind of have to work through some of these components. Awareness is going to be key for you. And then action, relief, guilt, repeat. As we see this, a lot of people get really guilty or have a guilt response because maybe they fell off their plan, or maybe they overconsumed, or maybe they had emotional response and use food as a mechanism to fill that gap. And when guilt comes up, you really have to work through that. What's the purpose of guilt? Um, you know, why would you want to beat yourself up even more? So there's some language patterns and some belief systems you have to work through. And I'll talk about, a couple different mechanisms you guys can start utilizing if this impacts you, right? So this doesn't impact everybody, but being aware in some format with your environment and your responses is always going to be a win for you because it allows you to make a better decision. So obviously we want to try to break the cycle before it begins or having more awareness to make better decisions. So here's some of and obviously there could be more, some hidden drivers, common emotional triggers around that can be around food. Yeah, obviously it can be around other addictive properties as well and other addictive things. So, stress from work or relationship. What's the stress? Okay. Again, fatigue or lack of sleep. Again, we're chasing energy there. Maybe feeling out of control or overwhelmed, and we use some type of food as a to fill the gap. Boredom or lack of stimulation, emotional void, needing comfort or reward, because there's some triggers that will be hit, some dopamine components that will be rewarded, unfortunately, with some of the food we consume. It's not necessarily willpower, it's awareness. Being aware. And this goes, I would push this outside of just food and in general. I think it's day to day, and the more aware you are with your environment, and the more understanding of how much control you do have, will allow you to make a lot better decisions. So some of the things you guys can do, if some of these are popping up or this is resonating, journaling is a big key because first of all, and that's why we have you guys track, right? And track all these data points because it's data, right? And the more data we have, the better decisions we can make, and it gives us feedback. So you can write down or journal, when you're hungry, what emotional components are built around that, or if you have identified any of these components that I just read through, maybe you should start utilizing, this as a tool or a way to identify how you respond in certain situations, and is food filling the gap for some of these, these trigger responses. So again, we want to have awareness, number one, because it's going to allow us to make a better decision and recognize patterns that sometimes, again, um, we get into these, and I almost would say, um, and I'll give you an example, and I'm jumping outside the presentation a little bit, but many times we get into an altered state in certain situations, we don't even realize it. So I'll give you an example. When you're driving a car and 10 to 15 minutes go by and you're like, wow, I'm almost home and I didn't realize, uh, you know, I was, driving down the same path I always drive down. And many times we can get into an altered state and time goes by and we're from point A to point B before we even uh, realize that we've been in an altered state. Many times if you consume, different formats of entertainment, whether it's TV, whether it's the platform of social media, TikTok, whatever you want to call it, videos. They're really designed to put you in an altered state. And sometimes what we see, again, same thing with TV programming. And sometimes what we see and what happens to individuals is when they're in those states, they may be consuming food and they're not aware, right? So you're sitting there watching TV, you kind of go into an altered state, and before you know it, the bag of chips is consumed. That's just an example of the ability to have awareness if these situations appear. So, we see this happen because sometimes boredom, you're consuming food and you didn't even realize, how many calories you're consuming. So there's just different ways or different things that happen within our day to day that if we have more awareness, again, we can make a little bit better decisions. So when do you usually snack or overeat? What emotions or thoughts come right before that if you have those? And what you can do is go into, let's go ahead and um, label it. So I'm not hungry. I'm anxious. Identify what's going on, what emotional response. I'm not tired. I'm avoiding a task, whatever it may be. Again, these are just, some examples I came up with. What we want to do is kind of redirect those those components to a better outcome. So you want to pause, breathe, make sure that you're coherent or there, right? You're not in an altered state. Choose a better outlet. Again, and this can go for a multitude of situations, not only being an altered state, I would say an emotional state as well, because again, if we can get you into out of the fight or flight, and that's where breathing comes in. So you can hit 3 or 4 diaphragmatic breaths, and it pulls you back out into your sympathetic parasympathetic. So you get your fight or flight or your rest relaxation. The better you become at breathing, the faster you can manipulate back into a calm, better state, so you can make a better decision. Again, that will go with stress response as well. So, but that's why the breath is in there. You'll see it here a little bit later. Again, choose your outlet because you have more control and you're in a calm state. So here's some examples of how you want to go about stress response or stress eating cycles. And these are just some tactical tools that you can implement. So again, the pause, the reason you want to pause is because you want to try to get back into a better state of mind. So wait 10 minutes before eating, uh, evaluate the situation. Is it a true stress or is it a stress that I created from a mental component? You know, and then, hey, what's the best decision or best outcome that I can make? And then look at swapping the sensation. Hey, how can I replace consuming, you know, food as filling the gap? What other components can I put in its place that's going to serve me better? So like walking, stretching, cold exposure, breath work, chewing gum or gum chewing, drinking water, any of those components that's going to kind of break your state. Many times we get in a little bit of a problem when we're in a state that is not conducive for a proper outcome. What I'm saying is you let the emotional component control your outcome. So your decision making is altered. And if you can break your state, so you can do that in a multitude of ways. And I just went through some of them, or get out of that environment really quickly. But at that time, step away, allow yourself to calm down. Then you can make a better decision, and one that's going to be, um, you know, going to give you a better outcome. Some other techniques that you can do, and this is help. This is with stress response in central nervous system as well. Grounding, so you can go outside and walk barefoot. It's a great technique. I do it quite often. It's just one of those things. It actually works. So you can do the breath technique. There's a lot of different breath work techniques. 5 deep breaths. Try to do a diaphragmatic and or nasal breathing. That's going to help put you in a better state. You can notice 3 things you can see. So what this is trying to do is really trying to break your state till you can touch. And this is going through a sensory component. So it's breaking your state and then going through all the sensory responses. That way you have total control. So till you can touch, when you can hear. So again, we're going through all those stimulation responses or responses. Environmental reset. I just kind of talked about that. Um, getting rebuilding your environment to be more conducive for your outcome. Again, keep trigger foods out of reach, or you may not have them. If you know there's certain ones that really are pretty detrimental, addictive, and you want to reflect. It's not a judgment component. It's awareness. Awareness is always going to kill shame. Awareness is going to allow you to make a better decision. Being aware gives you the tools to have a better outcome. Again, it's just like I was talking about with tracking and journaling. And then rewriting some of the patterns that you may have with rewards. So instead of rewarding with food, reward with alignment. Who are you becoming? What are those actions of that person? So, I know Aaron has you guys do a lot of these components and define some of the attributes and things of that nature of yourself. And the healthy version of you, what is those actions? What do they do? How do they show up? So you want to have alignment with that. So feeling proud is more satisfied than a sugar rush, right? We're gonna have a crash after the rush. So replace I deserve this with I'm building this. This is who I am now. So it's language patterns and thought process. So an example, celebrate a stressful day with movement, sauna, quiet time, breathing, reward progress with, gear, experiences, self-care, not necessarily calories. So these are just ways to, redefine the reward patterns that you may already have built in. We just need to rewrite them and reprogram some of those mechanisms. So here's some components about the mindset aspect of it. So the motivation, and you probably heard us talk about this or Aaron talk about this, and we see this quite often. Well, I'm not motivated. Uh, Motivation is created really. It's a mindset. Motivation's always going to come and go. We're not always motivated to do stuff, but I will tell you, action will help create motivation, and so will a lot of other things. Obviously, certain recognition, certain rewards. You know, getting the needle to move, right? How you looks, maybe getting into some new wardrobes, new clothing. That's all going to be a motivational component. So really identifying the person you're becoming and how you show up is going to be the driver because motivation will come and go. It always does. I don't always feel like going and working out, but I know when I'm done, I feel better, and I know it's moving the needle in the direction I want it to go. So, and then when you look at discipline isn't punishment, um, it's protection of what matters most. So, you know, sometimes we do have to be disciplined to the process, and again, it doesn't have to be a negative word because sometimes people put it in that format. So when you really look at it, you've heard me say this before, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your standards. So if you're setting certain expectations for yourself, let's try to obviously, level up and meet those components. So this is a lot of, internal representation and work on your language patterns. Build your identity as someone who handles stress, obviously with grace and strength. And then really identify what is the stress? Is it truly a stress or is it stress that is a mental stress? Obviously, there are certain situations that are going to be very stressful. Shit does happen. We can't control some of those components. So, but how we respond is going to be important. And again, the more you act with that new identity or that new person, new version, the easier it gets. So those habits will fall in line with who that new person is. Again, example, instead of I need to stop stress eating, language is important. I'm the kind of person who manages stress without food. Again, these are just small examples of the mindset component reframing. A lot of this stuff that I'm talking about is neuro linguistic programming. It's NLP training that Aaron and I have been have gone through personally. So really, shift from the emotional component action to awareness to intention. Again, we have to kind of address the old patterns, identify them. If you know them, I would write them down in a journal about them and identify, some of the reasonings why you have those patterns. And if there's an emotional attachment to those patterns, you have to identify what that emotion is and learn from that emotion. So what's the lesson from that? Is there something else that maybe once you let that go, it will allow you to move on from that, to learn from it. So again, old patterns, stress, food, guilt. So there's a cycle. We've seen this. I've worked with clients, um, who go through this. I'm work with a gentleman that we're working on these components right now. So it's not a male or female thing, but it's a it's some patterns or things that we've been exposed to. It's more of that component. So maybe you look at it as a new pattern, stress, awareness, choice, and then the desired outcome. You feel good about it. So when we really think about it, the transformation is a transformation, not a restriction, but being more aware. And once you identify it and work through maybe some of those emotional, triggers and try to extract the lesson from it, that it's going to give you, the opportunity to move on from it. So what you can do with this and what I'm talking about, identify one stress pattern that you can reframe this week. If you already know one, go ahead and write it down, and you want to probably start really working um, on that component. So what I'm saying there is, okay, why do I do X, Y, Z? Is there emotion? Is it anger, sadness, whatever's tied to it? And if you first thing that comes to your mind, what's the lesson? Why am I allowing this to, dictate my outcome? And if you can extract a lesson, you can just let it go and then move on. It doesn't have to control you. So here's some practical components of the mindset and some of the reframing. And reframing is again reframing language patterns, thought processes. So ask these, three questions before reacting. What am I feeling right now? So again, is it emotion? Kind of dig yourself through that process. What do I actually need? You know, is it rest, connection, relief? What gap am I trying to fill um, in there right now? What what's the aligned action I can take to have the desired outcome? So again, you want to kind of walk yourself through this process. Example, step outside for 5 minutes, deep breath, reset. You know, you can do a quick, body weight movement or burst to again change your state. That's what it's doing. Journal one line about the emotional response. Again, I would probably go a little bit deeper into the emotion. Why am I having this? And try to extract the learning from that emotion. And then once you have that understanding of why that triggers, you can let it go and move on from it. It doesn't have to control you. Again, you can break it down to daily, obviously practices, or you can reflect nightly, just like when you journal your food. It's not a You got to kind of reframe the thought process. That's all feedback because what you're doing is you're identifying your ability and skill set to learn how to fuel your body properly. And a lot of the data points that you even see yourself, obviously we see them on our side. It's data points, and the better feedback you guys can get, the more educated you can get, the better decisions you guys can make. So, it's always feedback when you're journaling, data entering. Uh, so reflect. You can do a reflection. When did I use food for comfort today, or maybe you didn't, or maybe you used it in a stress response as well. Right. One way you can handle it differently. Obviously, tomorrow focus on the progress. And it doesn't have to be perfect. We just got to work through it. So, some optional tools would be some type of habit tracker. Mark when you're successfully pause before eating emotionally. Again, you can use this in a format of journaling. But again, the first thing you do have to do is be aware. And that was way back when I talked about that, because awareness is going to be the foundational component, and then identifying how you're feeling, what's some of the triggers, and then work through some of these tools that I'm talking or that have given you, or strategies, I should say. So really the takeaway from this, and again, this is again, is it has it correlate with nutrition? Yes, because you know, um, you know, obviously food it can be very addictive and used as a tool now, good and bad, right? So Many times food isn't the problem, it's the mirror, okay? It's a reflection of what you have to work through personally. When you rewrite some of these triggers and align your actions with your values, you take back control, not just with food, but obviously in other situations. Because again, this is just food. Uh, Stress response in general, and managing your stress response it is key because it gives you a lot more control. So again, discipline is freedom when your habits align with who you want to become. Again, I was talking about that identity and that new version of you. What does that look like? Those attributes. And then, you can mimic, find somebody that's healthy that you know, and what do they do? What's their actions, right? And you can line up your actions with theirs, and that's going to move the needle in that direction. So you can choose one emotional pattern to reframe this week and one new identity-based habit to replace it. So again, if you're having those emotional patterns, you want to reframe them. I talked about all those tools to reframe. And language is very powerful, and your thought process towards certain situations. When you start changing the thought process towards those situations and language patterns towards them, is going to give you a little bit more control on how you respond to those situations. So again, this is a little bit probably deeper, but it is there's a lot of validity, around some of these triggers and habits and emotional awareness and language, because all these can impact how somebody gets from point A to point B and how fast somebody gets from point A to point B in their health journey. So, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and I know it's a little bit shorter because it's you could go another layer, but it gets a little bit deeper into the NLP language patterns and and some of the other tools and things that uh, we may use in certain coaching formats. So I'm going to open it up and see if you guys have any specific questions for me. Again, if it's outside the realm of what I just went through, no worries. I can answer anything you have, but if I don't have the answer, I'll get back to you on that. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and stop the share and just open it up, see if there's any questions for me. I know it's an exciting topic, but it's a relevant because obviously with as many years I've been in the coaching industry, I've worked with a lot of clients in this format in the emotional response and addictive components around food. So
I'll ask a quick question. This is
sure,
Pam.
yeah,
Um, Outside of, I know my issue really has been kind of just overall stress.
hmm
Um, haven't being 51 years old, still haven't figured out a good way to de-stress, if you will. Outside of like doing the grounding work, going outside kind of and the breath work, are there other things that kind of that you have found that really kind of help reduce it? Because as much as you think I'm handling stress, I'm really not. So,
yeah, it's a central nervous system. I mean, um, some of the well, so I'm gonna back it up just a little bit, and I might challenge you on your perspective. I would first of all, I went through this training, and it was eye-opening. Again, many times the stress we create is our own mind creating the stress. So we have to sometimes reframe our thoughts. Okay, are we in danger? Because that's what a stress response is. Or do we need to get out of the way because we're getting ready to be ran over by a car, right? That's a true stress. Now, I don't want to negate or discount, and this is always a tricky component. Discount anybody's feelings, anybody's response to stress, because we all show up a little bit different based upon our programs that we're running and our experiences. But through the training that we had gone through, Aaron and I had gone through, this is one of the big components that we were taught is really identifying is it a true stress and why are we having this response to that specific situation or that stress that may not be because a lot of times if we start digging in that specific component that you're stressed about, we can, from a conceptual standpoint and understanding, break it down where it's really not a stress. Then we say, okay, it's a financial stress. Well, they're going to reframe some of our thoughts and say, hey, what's our relationship with money? And then we need to go down that path.
Hmm.
So it can be a little bit tricky from that standpoint. So I'm giving you some of the NLP.
Sure.
Now I'm gonna give you a tool. The number one way that you can manage stress response is being very good at breathing. So, and it's just like anything else, the more practice, the better you'll get.
Mhm.
So there's and in our modules we have some box breathing stuff, some diaphragmatic breathing stuff. Um, Wim Hof breathing is another one. It's a little bit more forced breathing, but Wim Hof is the one that also does cold exposure on top of breathing. But the main foundational component that Wim Hof teaches is understanding your central nervous system and breathing. Because the better you become at breathing properly, you will be able to back yourself out of stress from a central nervous system standpoint. So you'll pull yourself out of fight or flight instantly once you become more in tune with your breathing patterns. Many people are chest breathers, shallow breathers. They're breathing from their traps, and it's autonomic. It's the autonomic nervous system. So we have to breathe, right? But our patterns of breathing typically are in stress. Um, so what we do is we walk around in fight or flight most days, most people. So and you may be accustomed to that. We can survive in that, but after years and years, stuff will start showing and breaking down, right?
Hmm.
So we'll start having higher inflammatory responses, hormonal responses. Sleep is not as good. So we're really good at adaptation and um, maneuvering our bodies through situations like that. But then eventually, stuff starts breaking down. So breathing's number one, Pam.
Okay.
So we need to work on, okay, what does that look like? We can give you some resources on some apps that you can follow and things of that nature.
Okay.
But it's the simplest way to pull yourself out of fight or flight. And once you start working on it on a daily basis, you will see the difference in how your tonality and stuff from feeling relaxed in comparison to being in fight or flight.
Awesome. Thanks.
So hopefully that helps. But
Yeah.
we can give you some other resources. Again, it's so simple and it's free.
Hmm.
But many times, we want to not use the stuff that we already have. Sometimes we always look outside of what's already available and free for us, and look for other strategies and situations. But it's one of the best tools that you can probably start mastering, and it helps with your sleep as well.
Okay. Awesome.
And
Thank you.
I would say some of the other components you can bring in to help is if you have access to a sauna is really good. Central nervous system response. It helps with the detoxification, lymphatic components, and then it will help with heat shock protein and your inflammatory response. So all those are really good benefits from sauna. If you want to get really brave, cold exposure is a good one as well, because what it will do is it will teach you how to breathe when you're in a stressful situation. When you get in a cold plunge, what happens is your body responds like, hey, I'm going to die. So, and when that happens, your central nervous system responds in a stress response. And then what you have to do is do your diaphragmatic breathing to pull you back into a better state. So that's one of the good tools with practicing cold exposure, but it's not, you don't have to do it. It's just another tool. But yes, stress is it is tricky. And being able to control it is within everybody's grasp. It just takes practice. Awesome. Is there any other questions? I see that, Connie. Thanks. Yeah, no, it's one of those. It's not a you know it's not a sexy topic in nutrition. I don't know if there's any sexy topics in nutrition, but it's all good. Well, awesome. Well, hopefully this is helpful. And then, with stress, hey, I could probably put together a couple resources for you guys that I could send out. Again, it's I would say people are wired a little bit different. What I'm saying there is how they respond to specific situations and stress responses. Um, you know, and again, as we get more control of the central nervous system, it allows you to respond much faster. And again, when you practice the breathing component consistently, you'll notice a difference of that stress response. Well, awesome. Any other questions? Nope, nope. So what I will do is I will pull a couple resources for first breathing, right? I'll dump down because I know we have it over in some of the modules. I'll dump down some techniques you guys can try and maybe some resources from for some apps that you can follow. But it does sometimes it can be a little bit tricky if you try to do it on your own. Uh, there are you have to find them. They're a little bit harder to find. It's going to be a breath work class, and there's practitioners out there that do breath work only. Um, One of my good friends, he does one out of Chicago, and that's 100% what he does as a coach. He's a breathwork coach. But if you can find one of those, and again, I'll share this over. You can find a location to go to. It's really good because with a practitioner, obviously being hands-on, it helps a little bit because they can identify those breathing patterns and then help you adjust and make sure you're dialing in your proper diaphragmatic breathing or using your diaphragm properly. Because many times what happens is we're shallow breathers and we're using the rib cage and traps to pull up, uh, how the diaphragm is actually supposed to work. And we get really tight right in that area. Now, there's a technique that Aaron has probably shared with some of you called RPR, which is a muscle activation technique that we used to use in our physical location. And it's all built around first diaphragmatic breathing, but it also shows you data points, which I could share this over, but this is a little tricky as well to not have a practitioner on hand. But it has data points on your diaphragm where we typically get tight if we're shallow breathers, and it doesn't allow our diaphragm to expand properly. So becomes a little bit challenging to breathe deeply, without force. Uh, but again, I could share some of these components over. It's just some good resources. We have them. They're just not right in front of you. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you getting on. I know I mean, it's an interesting topic, obviously, and it's a topic that I think, um, some individuals struggle with a little bit more. It's just a matter of how can we work through this and come on the other side with more control.
One thing I could add is,
Mhm.
as a supplement on top of learning the breathing techniques, which really do have a great effect on the central nervous system and the adrenals, but there's also a product and that's called Rescue Remedy,
Mhm.
um, and it's energetic. It's not medicine. It's over the counter. You can get it on Amazon or at your local uh, health food store or natural store. And you just take 4 drops, put it on your tongue or in your water, and you can do that every 15 minutes when you know you're going into a stressful situation or you've been in a stressful situation, and it just helps to calm the nervous system.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, thanks for the resource. Over the years, I've tried different products. I've tried some of the hemp products, the CBD and stuff, and it was some of those. Some of them I responded well to, and some of them I didn't. And
Oh, good.
again, how my receptors were.
Yeah.
from person to person.
Yeah,
But
and it's non-medicinal. It's
mhm.
essentially it's energetics from flower blossoms.
Oh, I got you.
And it's homeopathic, completely natural. It won't interact with anything. And I've never heard of anyone having any adverse reactions to it because it's mostly water and energy.
Yeah. Well, awesome.
So a little woo, but it's helpful.
There's a lot of woo out there. It's all good. Hey, sometimes you got to believe in the woo.
Yep, bring it.
Yep. All right. Well, you guys have an awesome day. Again, I'll try to put some of these. I have to make some notes here so I can get you guys some of these resources. Uh, and again, if you have other questions, never hesitate to reach out. You guys have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.